Hi, everyone. Once again, thanks again for joining us tonight. For those of you who just joined, welcome. So during this interactive speaker panel tonight, we'll explore this fascinating topic of how to become an attractive UX candidate that employers really want to hire. So we've invited some awesome folks that you have just seen who have successfully done that and who will share their insights from their journeys and also answer some of your questions as well. So for those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Michael, and I'm the founder of the company called BeginX, which you have probably seen on the event page. So BeginX, what BeginX is, right? It's a UX career accelerator based on real mission-driven client projects that helps people transition, people who know UX basics specifically, transition into the field in one of the most efficient and affordable ways and without quitting their jobs, right? So also do not mean this to brag, but just wanted to give you a bit of a background. So we've run multiple cohorts and helped over 90 people or so get hired into UX roles by now. So as you can see, they have been went to work for all these many of these different companies here. So we've basically seen lots of people and go through this entire transition. So as we discuss this topic with the speakers tonight, we'll pause once during the webinar to take some questions. We may pause actually a couple of times. We want to make this as interactive as possible. And we'll take more questions after the event as well. So if you have questions as we're going through the content, please make sure you write it down so you can ask it later, because we want to make sure everything is covered and everyone gets some awesome insights tonight. Sounds good? All right, so before we jump into the actual discussion, let's quickly set the stage and cover a few quick concepts that will help us guide the discussion. So these are just some tips that we like to give our own alumni, our own students, and just anyone who we consult in general. Basically, one of the key points, right? And again, we've done a ton of research, right? Probably like interviewed, I think there's a slide on that in a couple of slides, interviewed like hundreds of candidates, probably like over 40 employers, right? And again, one of the biggest biggest mistakes people make is they're not starting with the end in mind, right? So that's one of the key points to take away. It's basically starting with the end in mind. You want to understand where exactly you need to get to be quite hireable by employers, and then how exactly you'll get there, right? Sounds common sense, right? But you'll be surprised so many people make this mistake. So we'll jump through these slides quickly because we want to get to the discussion ASAP. And by the way, so for those of you guys who stick around until the end, we'll also share all these slides with you through a handout, made a PDF handout that we'll share at the end. So basically, when you start with the end in mind, right, here are like the key competencies that we identified by doing all this research and over the years and interviewing lots of candidates who had a lot of success, and as well as lots of companies and employers, right? So this is just a summary. We're not going to go into a ton of detail here. So hard skills, right? Just one of the competencies. Softer skills, often even more important than hard skills. Real experience, listed almost any job description. 3+ UX case studies usually. And on the more marketing and job search side, right? Obviously portfolio that shows the case studies, the skills, the experience. Resume and online presence that tell you a story. Mastery of effective UX job search strategies. And finally, UX interviewing and storytelling mastering. Storytelling is just huge, both on your job and in your search process. This is just a summary that I just talked about, right? So we've basically obviously did not come up with these insights out of thin air, right? So I interviewed hundreds of candidates, 30+ employers, hundreds of job postings have been analyzed, and we've by now ran over 50 events, probably even more, with both candidates and employers. So quick summary of this whole journey before we jump into the actual panel and getting some wonderful, awesome insights from these folks. You basically want to understand and map out how you will actually get there, right? So obviously, first step is just learn the essentials, learn the basics. I think most of you, based on our survey that we did when you guys registered for this event, so most of you already pretty much passed that stage or already in that stage, right? So this is just initial theory, basic skills, exercises, concepts, etc. Next, this is probably the largest phase of practice. We call it practice and grow, right? So this is hands-on, application-based phase. So during this, you can do some exercise, you can do some hypothetical projects, and you should also build some real experience, right? Basically, this is the phase where you build yourself up and where most of the real learning takes place. Then, based on that, you essentially take all of what you have done and create all the key search assets. And after that, you prepare for your search, and by learning effective job search strategies, by preparing for the interviewing part, right, and executing that effectively. Okay, so quick analogy that people love to, for some reason, like lots of people we spoke with really love this, right? So essentially, we just call this first phase learn and build, right? It's like a product or service analogy. So imagine you're a product, you're offering product or a service, and your skills and experience is essentially the product, right? And then the job search that you'll be doing, that's marketing and sales, right? And there are two main mistakes people make here, and big mistakes, right? During the learn and build phase, right? If you don't really build a product that is strong enough, that has all these key important qualities that are sufficient for the selling, then you may just get stuck for a long time in this marketing and sales phase, ineffectively applying, and this can last for like months or years sometimes. And then the next phase, right, it's marketing and sales. This is where a lot of people get stuck as well, because most designers they like to design and build, right? They don't really like marketing and sell necessarily. And a lot of people just treat this, just applying this to job search, right? It's basics, right? And if you treat it that way, you're very likely to get stuck in there, right? So it's important to really understand the science of marketing and sales, the science of job search, like the specifics of the UX process, and to be able to master this whole process and ultimately get a job. So last slide here before we jump to the panel. This is just everything put together, right? The core competencies that we mapped out map to the how-to process, right? And we try to make it very high level, very simple, so it's like very easy to understand, but at the same time, very handy and applicable. So tonight, right, we're going to focus primarily on the practice and growth phase. We'll touch a little bit on the marketing and sales phase and talk about the assets, about the portfolio. We have quite a few questions for our panel. We'll talk about how to gain those, what are those hard skills, what are the soft skills, how to gain them, how many case studies you want, how to build real experience, basically explore all these different areas. All right, so with that said, let's jump to our wonderful panel finally. Do you guys want to turn your cameras back? All right, awesome. So why don't you guys just start with briefly introducing yourself? Just tell like what's your name, what you have done before UX, what you're doing now, and like just introduce yourself briefly.
Sure.
Chris, want to start?
All
right, Demal. Yeah.
No, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, sure. Thank you. So my name is Chris Jimenez from the Bronx, New York. Before product design, I'm currently a product designer now, but before that, I worked in advertising for about 5 years as an art director in New York, in Brooklyn. And in that field, I learned a lot about, developing empathy for my customer base, for, what they call the marketing audiences, learning how to delve into the world of creativity and understanding a brief and being able to work within a team and develop creative concepts that solve the business need at the end of the day, that help sell a product to audience and connect with them on an emotional and intellectual level. Afterwards, about 5 years later, I started making the transition to UX design. I was really interested in that, and I noticed that a lot of job openings were asking for that. Even in the advertising world, we're asking for some knowledge in UX. It's been a buzzword for a long time. However, I started noticing that around 2017, and eventually, through looking for different seminars from General Assembly and other places in New York City, I came across BeginX, where I met Mike and the wonderful panel of mentors there, where I started learning a bit more about different UX practices, different possibilities within the world of UX, getting in touch with client base at BeginX and actually learning and practicing my skills at the same time and getting some real world experience. And from there, just through my network and being in touch with different people and letting them know that, I was evolving my skill set, was able to kind of get different UX opportunities, which eventually landed me a role at Olo doing product design full-time.
Thank you, Chris.
So my name, so I'm Jamal. So my background is, I guess, quite colorful. I have a bachelor's in architecture and in sculpture. And about in 2015, I decided to jump into a master's degree for interactive design media. And in that program, I explored game design, from game design all the way up until I don't know, there's fashion classes and stuff like that. But I took a course in human computer interaction, and that's where it really launched me into the kind of industry of UX. And after that, I had kind of freelance gigs after my grad program, working at different startups in product design and UX, UI, and also worked as a developer, a data analyst / Python developer. And I really wanted to kind of take UX a little bit more seriously. So I did join BeginX and to kind of brush up on some of my skills. And now I'm a UX UI designer at Infosys / Wong Duty. Technically, I'm a Wong Duty employee now because Infosys actually acquired Wong Duty, which is a creative agency. So yeah, now I'm kind of in the role of experience design, which is so many different titles out there for, within the UX design industry. But yeah, I'm excited to really, talk to you all and get to know your experiences.
Thank you, Jamal.
I'll go next.
That's a lot of different experience you have there.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, we can get into it later.
It's great though. It all feeds in sort of to UX research. It's all going to be useful. My name is Carrie Beasley, and I started out as a fine artist. I have a background. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in painting, and after school, I went into elementary education and art education. So I didn't really know what else to do, but that was a while ago. And I've since done search engine optimization, web design, marketing, all in the online world, where and just before I transitioned into UX, I was doing a medical device sales role. So where I was perfectly positioned to informally conduct user research, and it was really exciting. Probably more exciting than a lot of the stuff I've done since then. But I was able to formally transition into a sales role at a UX agency, where I worked for a little while and gained the confidence that I needed to know that I could do this. At that time, I was taking. I decided to go into the BeginX program, and while I was there, I worked with Chris. Chris and I were on the same team at BeginX, and we during the time that I was there, just toward the end, I got a position as a user research with JP Morgan Chase, and I was there for a year and a half, and I learned a ton and worked with a great team. Since then, I've done contracts with huge agency, Capco agency, a consultancy, I guess, and also with a small company that did cybersecurity. So I've kind of got agency experience, enterprise experience. I've got full-time, I've got contracts, all kinds of different things since I formally transitioned into the UX field. So, but BeginX is one of the things that helped me determine that research is where I wanted to be instead of design. So.
Thank you, Carrie.
I'll go next and last, I guess. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Sasha Sibruk. I'm from Russia, and my background is economics and constitutional law. My transitioning to UX has started, I think I'm still in process, it's never ending process, has started 3.5 years ago when I decided that after a little bit of a research, I decided this is something I would like to do for the rest of my life. And I learned a little bit online and then signed up for on-campus course UX UI at a New York City school that is no longer open. Landed my first internship, landed my first full-time job, and still felt that I'm not exactly where I want to be. At that point, I had to do a lot of e-commerce and marketing and a little bit of UX. I joined BeginX, I think, together with Jamal, and Carrie was invited guest. There was an awesome group, and after BeginX, I was able to land a really good job. My last gig at a legal tech startup, where I enjoyed working a lot and learned so much. And right now, I'm at a new stage of my journey. I'm starting my new job on Monday at a company that creates software and hardware for eye care industry. So
Congratulations.
that's where I am. Thank you.
Congrats.
Great.
Thank you, Sasha.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Yes. So as you guys noticed, right? So just to get it out there, so all these folks are our grads, right? But obviously, just to clarify, the event is not about our program, right? It's about how to become an attractive UX candidate that employers want to hire, right? So, and we just want to learn from these guys and get all the different insights that they have for you while they were going through this journey, right? So the first question I want to ask you guys is, and by the way, so I'll moderate the panel, right? I sometimes might have to interrupt you, right, to just make sure we're on time, we're running, everything efficiently, et cetera, and that everyone has a chance to ask, like, whatever, people who have questions have a chance to ask them. So something I want to start with is kind of high-level thing at first, right? Because, and one of the most important questions, right? How do you actually know if you should become a UX designer? This is just taking a step back before we jump into marketability.
I don't know. I guess I'll throw out. So I give an example of maybe when I was a kid. So I remember my sister and I, we wanted to like pop popcorn and cook popcorn in the microwave, and we were staying at the, all these like this UI, this microwave, trying to like figure out what button to push, and like we were overwhelmed by all these different buttons and what to do. And I feel like if you ever experience dealing with an application, whether it's something physical or digital, where there's like any, like we call them pain points, or anything that you really just frustrated by, and you want to see it improve in some way, I think UX is the kind of feel for you, because for me at least, the idea of empathy is super important when you're designing for people, and I think making that meaningful impact in someone's life is like, that's kind of what gets me up every day.
I know for myself, I've always get particularly annoyed when I'm trying to give a company money, and it's hard. I can't believe that people have a product or a service they need to sell, and they make it so hard that you have to jump through a million hoops, and that just really bothers me. But I think it's I can break that down even further. I really get interested and excited about connecting people with information that they need. And I'm old enough to remember when the internet was awful and you couldn't find anything and you couldn't get anything done. And I was really excited about the idea of the internet and really mad that I couldn't access the things that I knew were out there. So that's why I got into like SEO. But I ultimately ended up here because this is where you make things easier for people, and it's just really gratifying to come back with findings from a group of users to people who are making something and tell them, okay, we're really doing this right, but boy, is this wrong. We've got to fix it. And if you can get people over and tell them that successfully and convey that from the users, it's really exciting to me. I think if you like fixing things, you're right. You're good for UX, you know? You like to fix processes.
Improving things, problem solving.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would add the same thing. Just the good feeling about making any improvements in any area of your life, even, you know, home improvements or something. UX is not only about digital product, but can be hardware, for example. Yeah, I think that's important. Another thing I would say, when I was in my research, if I would like to be a UX designer, I met with a few people that were already in the industry, and it just looked at their day, what they do, how they think, you know, what's around them. And it's important to know how your day will look like and understand if that's something that fits you or not.
I think one indicator that would be a sign that UX may be a field that one would be interested in pursuing is questioning. If you have a lot of questions, if you're the type of person that's always asking questions almost in any scenario, then UX may be a field for you. Obviously, I would feel that person should be compelled to, you know, investigate what UX is, you know, research on the internet, and then understand what that is, and then see how it relates to them. But a lot of times those indicators come up, you know, as Jamal was saying, you know, as a child or in your youth, some of those things pop up, like the way that you look at the world, your perspective. You know, if you're someone that's trying to understand people, really interested in other people's perspectives, or very inventive, or not only just trying to fix or solve problems, but actually trying to spot the problems, then UX may be actually a field that's for you. For me, those are the kind of things, this quest for empathy, trying to understand the people around me, understanding, you know, why people do the things they do, think the ways they think, why certain things exist in the first place, and how do they get there. Those are the things that drove me personally in my pursuit of art and music, eventually professionally into fields like art direction and advertising, where you need to have those empathetic skills to understand the people that you're marketing a product to. And then finally, or ultimately, to UX, where you're developing empathy, not just for the users or the consumers, but also for the business end, right? For the brand that you're trying to solve a problem for, or even your own company, what their mission is. All those things, kind of like being this mad scientist, right? Looking for the answers behind the questions and the problems are what UX is about. And if you're someone that's really interested in that, then, you know, I highly encourage you look into it even further and see how far the rabbit hole goes, and if you're actually interested in pursuing that.
Thank you, Chris. So I think we had everyone. So to kind of move things forward a little bit, so what hard skills do you think you really need to get a UX design job? Like, talking about hard skills specifically. So not empathy yet, but like the more technical, harder type of skills, or software, or just want to make sure we cover that.
Are you talking about UX design or research?
Both. The entire UX process. So from research to design.
Well, if you're a researcher, it helps to know Excel and be able to sort and filter data in a more sophisticated way using that piece of software. It's something you can get away with, but it's not essential. But it's really helpful to know how to do that and be able to think like that. I also think it's important to be able to make the changes you need to make to a prototype when you're testing it And so in that way, I think InVision and Sketch are the ones that I've used in the past. They're not the best tools. There are a lot of people who have told me that they are annoyed by this, they're annoyed by that with Sketch and InVision, but those are the only ones I've got, those are the ones I've used in every position I've had. But those are the two that I think, other than, Word,
No.
those are the ones that I think are good for a researcher.
Mhm.
In terms of like UI, yeah, of course. I mean, some people mentioned in the chat Sketch, Figma for sure. It really depends on what you're comfortable with. I would choose one and stick with it. I know a lot of companies, mention in their just job description Sketch. Nowadays, Figma's picking up. But it's really about getting comfortable with one and just running with it. And most of these kind of wireframing softwares, they're alike. So if you're able to understand like kind of how to navigate one, you kind of be able to understand how to navigate all of them. But yeah, I think overall, just being able to work software in general, like, or being able to kind of, if you don't know something, be able to kind of go on Google and figure it out. Like taking that extra step is also important. Being curious about how to use a software.
Yeah, I would agree with Jamal that knowing just one of these tools would be enough for start. Just recently coming out of many interviews, I noticed that many companies are transitioning from Sketch to Figma, but it's not going to be a problem if you have at least a few weeks before joining a company to just review and get basics. I think it would be pretty fast transition. Sketch, InVision, and Google products.
Yeah, I see people mentioning Sketch in the comments. Sketch is definitely the industry standard. In a lot of companies that deal with UX, you will see that is the tool of choice. Adobe XD, I don't see it so much being used, at least by my colleagues. However, aside from Sketch, programs that help, and again, it depends on the company that you work for, or if you're working for an agency. There's rapid prototyping tools, or for example, like Marvel app that people start to use, or Whimsical for rapid wireframing. Sketch is, like I mentioned before, definitely up there. There's also Abstract, which is a tool that works. Jamal knows what I'm talking about. Yeah, it works. Yeah, it's a web app that works. Also, I believe it's also a desktop as well, but it helps with versioning in Sketch. So you kind of avoid the whole version 2A, final version 1, final. It just helps create, the streamlined flow of being, you're able to travel through time, so to speak, in the versions of your products. But I recommend just the other panelists, start with Sketch. And also, if Adobe XD piques your interest, look into that as well. The interesting thing about all these products that we're mentioning is that they follow a very similar user interface. So you will have a toolbar, you will have your cursor, you will have a canvas or a frame or an artboard, and Command D or Control D or Command Z, Control Z, they all have the same function.
Hotkeys, yeah.
Yeah, so the cool thing is you can, feel free to explore all of those apart from Sketch and get comfortable with them. And if you're looking at a certain company, pay attention to what they ask for in terms of hard skills, and then look at that program and see how familiar it is to you, how easy it is to use. But Sketch is definitely the industry standard.
I saw someone. Sorry, go ahead.
No. And by the way, Jamal, just wanted to let you know, it looks like your video is frozen. So,
wow.
So we see you. It's or is it just me?
Either that or you're really great ventriloquist.
Let's see. Okay.
That's what I was thinking. Like Jamal has a new skill.
He's got some serious talent.
Talking.
See, now he left. Where'd he go?
So in terms of, if you think about hard skills, not just the tools, but also if you think about the UX process itself, right? What have been most, if you maybe think in terms of deliverables that you guys produced, right?
Think it.
As I mentioned,
what is typically most important? Sasha?
Sorry, I think everything freezes out.
Yeah,
so
go ahead. Go ahead.
as I mentioned in the comment, I think a lot, especially people asking about tools in a post-COVID world, when more companies are working remote, are using a lot Miro for creating, affinity maps with sticky notes. It really helps. As for hard skills in the process, I think it's important to know and have your own frameworks for creating personas, for creating user flows, for creating, let's see, site maps are very helpful in definitely knowledge how to prototype and wireframe. I guess these are, and to support what Carrie said, to just analyze data and create some structure out of a lot of unstructured information.
Thank you, Sasha. Carrie, I think you started saying something too.
I was just going to move on to some of the soft skills, but that I think are important.
Let's do one second. If anyone else wants to add any other kind of hard skills or like the main deliverables, right, that you would think about that you guys produce typically, mostly. Because I mean, if you look at the list of there's like a Nielsen Norman article, right? Most common deliverables, you can see there are like tons of different deliverables you could produce, but there are usually like top probably 3 to 5, right? They're most common. So what would those for you guys?
I would start with personas, right? And even before that, user stories, understanding what a user story is. And again, these are, terms that are very familiar in the engineering world, right? Or developing world where developers live in, where as a designer, you'll be interfacing with them and working together. But user stories, understanding what scenarios are, understanding how to create a persona and how to illustrate that, and how to make it feel real and inject those insights in there. Those are very common deliverables. Aside from that, user journey, learning how to map out a user journey, how to show the flows within that journey, how to show any task flows within that journey are very important. How to rapidly wireframe is a very important skill to have. There may be times where you may find yourself in a position where people are talking about a certain problem, or there's a crossroads between your teammates, and being able to actually just visualize it right there on the spot helps out a lot. Rapid prototyping is something that's very key as well. Just being able to make it interactive and even lo-fi as well. And then tools like Jira. It's a tool mostly used in the engineering world, but some companies use that for designers as well. Being able to understand how to create a Jira ticket, how to incorporate your user stories and scenarios and problems and description of the work in that ticket helps as well. So those are some of the deliverables. And at the end of the day, in some companies, that ticket and how that ticket moves along your workflow is part of the deliverable in the sense where you can actually attach those deliverables, and we can actually place a name and person and time as to when a product was finished or it's being reviewed by teammates. So those just to name a few.
I think a lot of the time I've been able to use my favorite software to create whatever deliverable I need to. If I haven't been, like for instance, for me, I put it all, whatever tool I use, I export it and then put it into a Keynote. And if I don't have to use PowerPoint, I can use Keynote because I can distribute it as a PDF. So it really, I've been able to get away with just using my favorite Keynote when I'm creating a deck to present. But
Okay, cool.
Research is we're not really software. I mean, it's, you guys are the ones that need to be concerned with software, I think, more than research.
Okay, so that's good. Unless I think Jamal, you started saying something before your video froze, right? Did you want to come back to it, or do you want to talk about
no. I know this question comes up a lot about programming, about like HTML, CSS. I do not think you need to know HTML, CSS. Okay, if you know it, that is definitely you have a leg up on a lot of others, especially if you can rapid prototype within HTML, CSS, and create kind of interactive kind of UI and frames. but I don't think you need to kind of go out of your way to learn it. And in terms of, if you do learn it, I mean, if you do like want to learn it and add it to your toolkit, I can say personally, as someone with, a background in development, I really haven't been asked to kind of whip up a wireframe in HTML, CSS. It hasn't been a thing. And if you are interested in that side of, programming, I can mention like, a lot of, React, if you want to design, some UIs and practice that. But I don't think it's necessary for you to learn if you don't know it already. That's the only thing I wanted to mention. And I think Chris had also mentioned, like, in terms of deliverables, I'm not sure if you mentioned like user flows. I've seen that's something that's I've noticed is huge in terms of kicking off like within the kind of early stages of a project and defining kind of what the application will look like in the flow of it. I think that's huge for a lot of people to kind of, I feel like you kind of grasp and understand better like what each, whether it's screen, page will look like if you ever do that. So I would say practice that if anything, for sure.
The thing that I found really helpful is doing, instead of like the user flows, I like the idea, and I've used the idea of combining a wireframe with a flow, making wire flows. So you've got little screens, one to the other. I think that sort of eliminates a step there that makes things move quicker in the sprint process.
Mm-hmm.
Just
It also it's really difficult for people sometimes to visualize when you're on a team and you're trying to work out the UX of something, or whatever project, the software of. It's hard for people to visualize the complete flow.
Yes.
So it's really useful to be able to show that in a readout, like each screen, so that you can see what's missing.
I think just to add to that, I see a lot of comments on Miro. Miro is something that's also talked about a lot in the industry. It depends really on the culture, the design culture of your company, and also the tools that your teammates use. That you have to adapt to that depending on company you're at. But for me, my favorite go-to UX, I guess, hard skill is just good old pencil, paper, and a Post-it.
Definitely.
That's the most. Yeah, I think in any design or creative field, or even research, just being able to jot something down or quickly sketch something up on a piece of paper, take a picture of it with your phone, just airdrop it to your computer, be like, here. Sometimes a lot faster. In the last couple of weeks, I've been working from home, given the global situation. Sometimes just getting into, let's say, like Whimsical or just Sketch, you fall in this hole that many designers fall in, where you start paying attention to the pixels too much. You kind of need to press the pause button, go to a piece of paper, and just do some crazy eights and quickly knock out a few sketches, and then visualize it for yourself there, and then you save yourself a lot of time and trouble in making a choice, and then you can reflect it in a higher fidelity version. But paper and pencil are always going to be your best friends.
And for those in the audience, if you guys don't know what crazy eights are, right? That's basically, I think it's from Google Ventures Design Sprint book. So if you want to Google that, it's basically a fast way to sketch something out by folding a piece of paper in like 8 pieces and just sketching out, taking I think it's 1 minute, they suggest, 30 seconds or something like that for each one. But anyway, so what I also wanted just to point out, so if folks in the audience, for those of you guys who have questions, you can feel free to just put those in the Q&A. There's a special Q&A area. You should also be able to see others' questions as well. And if you do see those, you can upvote those, right? So just if you want to ask a question, make sure you put it there. This way, it's much easier for us to manage and prioritize questions and make sure we kind of get the most value from the event. So what we're going to cover next is, so we talk about hard skills briefly, right? What do you think, in your opinion, just quickly, And by the way, not everyone has to respond to like every single question. Just feel free, like what resonates more with you, what you're more interested in, where you have like the most insight and input, because we want to go through like as many of these as possible. What do you think are some of the best ways to actually get those skills, get those hard skills, and understand how to produce those deliverables? Do you recommend, what worked for you? Is it more hands-on for you? Do you just do it? Do you watch tutorials? Do you take part-time training? Do you take full-time? I mean, what, like, do you have any recommendations for just developing some of those hard skills, or any resources?
To this question, I think first thing you have to do before learning anything, find out what's your learning style. I know many people can go to tutorials that just don't work for them because the only style they can actually, in which they can actually absorb any information is just doing it. I know my work style, my learning style, I need some people around. So I need like an on-campus class or on Zoom class. I can't do it on my own. I need a little bit of a, social aspect. So that works for me, and I'm trying to just go for that every time. So learn how you learn and then go that way. Everything is available for free or not. There are always like workarounds to get lessons, like for those folks who are in Brooklyn Library provides free access to lynda.com with plenty of very, very amazing tutorials. There's also studying on LinkedIn. There's also just free information in blogs and posts over you can find in Google. So find out what works for you best and try to apply it.
I would second that. I think that's really important because I don't know how many tutorials I've purchased that I never end up completing. And I think you're right. It's one of those things where you think, well, that was a waste of money because I just didn't have anybody around to help to bounce ideas off of, or yeah.
I agree with
it's definitely, so sorry, Chris, just to add in there, I think that like the average completion rate for like those self-paced courses where you don't have any support at all, it's like 8% or something like that.
Wow.
So that's, you guys are definitely not the only ones.
So impressed by that.
It can require a ton of motivation, ton of discipline, which like most people don't have actually.
Yeah.
Chris, I think you started saying something.
Yeah, I think Jamal, were you trying to?
No. I don't.
Oh, was it Jamal? Jamal, it was you started saying something.
I haven't. No, anything. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay.
Yeah. I can add to that. I totally agree with Sasha's point. Figure out your learning style, and if it doesn't come to mind at the moment, just jump right in. Some of the best places to go is just YouTube, and just type in UX programs, and that's what I did. It always started with like a search engine search, just look up UX programs. I had some good friends of mine in the advertising world tell me, oh, Sketch, and then once I just downloaded a free trial of Sketch, started learning it. It was very similar to the world that I was living in at the time, which was the Adobe Creative Suite. That's kind of like riding a bike. You don't really forget what that UI is like and how to navigate it. And so when you start with Sketch, it feels familiar if you're used to like graphic design or editorial design. But highly recommend just go into YouTube, look at a lot of blogs online, and figure out the tools that are used. And just fearlessly jump right in, create, little projects for yourself, or something that you always wanted to see, as I've done, like passion projects. Create those, and then set a time for yourself and just dive right in. Practice with sketching, practice going on Sketch, try out Adobe XD, try out Miro, Abstract, everything. Get used to that world, and then you'll figure out where your strengths are and where you need to work on more. And also, if you're more into UI, join like UI competitions, or there's some groups on Facebook or on YouTube where they do live stream competitions or challenges. That kind of creates a sense of community and a sense of accountability that you now have to complete something at a certain time and then submit it for review, which is very similar to the real world. So those methods have helped me out, and they help out others as well, I've noticed.
Thank you, Chris. So let's also briefly, and by the way, we'll take and let's take another question. Let's do another question, then we'll do a quick audience Q&A break. And just as a reminder, guys, so just make sure you put your questions in the Q&A section. In terms of UI and graphic skills, right? Especially for those who want to work in like research or information architecture, what are your guys' thoughts? Like, how important are those?
How important are what? Those
UI and graphic design skills, kind of more visual design skills, like the latest phase of the UX process.
I think you need to know about interaction design, interaction patterns. I find the being up on the latest interaction design pattern trends far more useful as a researcher than skills in being able to create. I would say that your job as a researcher is to be able to recognize when an older, outdated pattern is being used that has been passed over in the marketplace, and most people are using this now. So I would say start paying attention to your banking sites or your Amazon and the different kinds of things that they're using to solve problems.
Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry.
No, I waited like 5 seconds.
It's magic. We have a rule: only 2 people can talk at the same time.
I guess it's a little hard for me to answer that question with full detail since I'm more on the designer side. However, I think that understanding at least the basics of, let's say, UI, patterns, or what a design system is, could help a researcher in understanding what patterns, and I don't mean patterns in terms of like UI elements. I mean like patterns in terms of like behavioral, psychological, any trends and how people are navigating a certain product. It could help them understand why what people are frequenting towards more. And then I think it can help in the communication between the researcher and someone who's a designer, but more on the visual side, understanding the basics of just, from graphic design to interaction design can help make that communication a little easier. And if the researcher has any ideas, they can communicate it with much more clarity in a way that the designer could understand by knowing a little bit about that world, even if it's just the basics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead. No, sorry, Sasha. I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh. No, you were waiting. I'm sorry.
No.
By the way, Jamal, I think you're frozen again. Just
Again?
to let you
Oh
know.
my.
Because we want to make sure when you answer, we want to see you.
The next question I will wait until everyone says they don't. Well, all the companies that I have joined before, I worked as a UX designer, and I play a role of both researcher and designer. And I guess it also depends on the environment you're trying to join. And all companies I worked with did not have any graphic designers, so I had to do all the visual parts as well. But once I got very lucky, and we had a very nice, a very beautiful design system, so it was almost very easy. But sometimes, yeah, you have to be the person who actually going to execute it to the level of pixel perfect. And it's definitely not your the most important skill, but if you want to be marketable, I think it's good to have, for sure.
Yeah, I think it could only help you if you're a researcher and you add that skill set to your resume. It could definitely make you much more marketable. Interestingly enough, I feel that good designers actually have really good research skills because in developing that empathy, this probably goes into more a little bit of the soft skills, but I think research itself has its hard skills. Being able to understand that audience and the relationship between them and the business definitely influences your design greatly. And if you're able to communicate that to your team in a way that makes sense, even visually, and bring in those insights, that actually helps. So interestingly enough, the inverse also applies for a designer. Having research skills can help you big time.
Definitely. Yeah, I was just going to say, can you all see me? First question.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. No, I was going to say that oftentimes now I keep like a folder on my desktop that's just like inspiration or like precedents of like different things that I really like enjoy or found online that I felt like was like beautiful UI. And oftentimes I'm like, oh, I'm trying to implement this new kind of feature within this program, for this application. Oh, that company X did it really well. Let me, see how I can maybe take from that and not kind of reinvent the wheel. And I think that's super important, kind of seeing what's out there. And like everyone said, doing that, taking the extra step and understanding kind of what you've seen and keeping that kind of repository, and that is super important for growth. Because last thing you want to do is like, change a feature or a functionality that like everyone's so used to, and reinvent it in a way that's really confusing. So understanding the patterns, like the design patterns that exist out there already, is super important. And I think for me, that's the only way I could really grow as a designer. Like Dribbble, there's a Design Inspiration is another one that I go to. I just like scroll through and like, oh, this is interesting. I see how they kind of what they implemented. It makes sense within the kind of larger context of the design. Yeah, that's all I want to say.
Thank you, Jamal. So thank you guys for sharing that. So yeah, we have a couple of questions. I noticed. So David, you asking about work experience and case studies. Let's do this because we have a couple of questions coming up about that. And if it is not covered, then let's come back to your questions at that time. So Derek, with the pandemic, I'm noticing employers who are typically looking for senior designers. It's actually not just with pandemic; it's probably in general. What advice could you give to junior level designers trying to get into the industry? Are there other sources you would recommend? Did you guys hear the question okay?
Yes.
Just keep looking, because there are companies that are looking for junior designers. And I actually once didn't get a job because it was for junior designer, and they said, nope, we're looking for someone just from a boot camp. So I know many people say, oh, if a company is looking for someone with 7 years experience, just apply and like try. No, don't apply. I don't think so. Don't get yourself disappointed. Just look for companies that write in descriptions something that you can possibly fit, and give it a try. It might take a month, maybe few, maybe 3, but just keep going and don't give up. Don't try to get in a company that is looking for senior designer if you don't have the skills, because it's just going to be a not satisfying experience for both of you, especially for you. So I would just keep looking.
Agreed. I think first realizing what is it that motivates you as a designer or a researcher in UX, and what is it that you're really interested. Use that as a filter when you're looking for companies, be it on LinkedIn or any kind of career search engine, and try and find people within your own network that may be working there. Rekindle those friendships if you haven't for in a long time. And just see what opportunities lie out there. A lot of times having someone inside that company that even you just talked to for a little bit on LinkedIn, or maybe had a conversation over the phone or video chat, you have greater chances of getting into that company than just submitting a resume, because those resumes do pile up. The pandemic has changed the world, as we've all seen this year, over its head. It's flipped everything upside down. There are a lot of opportunities there for providing a service to the people of the world through UX design. And if you're someone that's really interested in social impact, look for companies that specialize in not only UX, but social impact. My assumption or hypothesis would be there may be a greater need for UX designers there. But to Sasha's point, they may be more senior roles because the level of work is immediate. You're trying to deliver results at a certain pace. So gauge yourself, gauge the work, see what relationships currently exist between you and that employer. And if they're not any relationships, try and create those. Just be social, be a friend, and see where that leads and what doors open up there.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone else?
I would say that your best bet is to I know this is difficult now. Your best bet is to be referred by someone who's at the company. And if you need to ask for a recommendation, an introduction, I would do that on LinkedIn if you have a second degree connection, just ask your mutual connection for an introduction. I've done that. People do it all the time and they're happy to do it usually. Sorry.
Yeah. Thank you, Carrie. Yeah, that's actually a great point. And honestly, like even now in this time, right, still like you have more people sitting at home, right? And it's less fun, it's less social. So honestly, there are more people probably open to doing those informational interviews with, right? So it's a great way to build relationships, right? It's
Yep. That's exactly what I would recommend. Definitely, yes, 100%.
Yeah, so I mean, it's because imagine like if people are just sitting at home much more often, right? It's like life is a little bit more boring, right? So who wouldn't want to, meet a few more people, maybe mentor somebody, help somebody, right? I mean, of course, some people probably wouldn't, but there are plenty of people who would, right?
Yeah.
They just need to try. Okay, so I see there are a couple other questions about portfolio, right? So we'll get to portfolio in a second, guys. I just don't want to jump ahead too much. And also make sure your questions are specifically about making yourself an attractive candidate, like hard skills, soft skills, experience, to make sure that we stay on topic and it's relevant for everyone who joined. Okay, so next, let's jump into softer skills, right? What do you guys think? Like, what softer skills are most important in your opinion, and why?
I think the most important quality is being a good communicator and good at doing it on the fly and quickly, listening really hard and being able to communicate sometimes very complex concepts in that conversation.
I second that. I think being a communicator is definitely super important. More important than that is being a great listener, and also an active listener is one of the hardest things to do as a human being. But those are not just soft skills, they're life skills. A lot of life skills translate to very essential soft skills in the workplace, because ultimately the significance of soft skills in an interview is that when you're being interviewed, you're not just showing the work that can make you the great candidate for this role. You're also you want to show this person that you're someone that is an agreeable person to work with, that you're easy to get along with. If you guys have a moment where you have to make a very tough decision, are you going to be a very difficult person to work with, or are you going to be someone that not only can listen to what they say, but also understand and empathize with them, and also communicate your ideas effectively? So communication, listening, compromise, knowing when to compromise, understanding why you have to compromise, being able to, use your own UX skills like empathy in any situation is definitely super important.
I agree. Yeah, I think also having the ability to break down things into smaller parts is also huge. I think taking a complex problem and being able to kind of break it into chunks to better understand it is important within kind of UX. And to second what Chris said, I'm not sure if I read it in a book, but I read somewhere it's like employers want to hire people that they wouldn't mind being stuck in the airport with for like 4 hours, right? Which I felt like I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Oftentimes, especially in the airport, you're stuck there. You want to have a conversation with someone that's kind of personable, funny, and just to pass time. So like think about that when you go into interview. It's more of a conversation than it is kind of an interview. You're interviewing them as well. But I think for me, the biggest thing is definitely listening. And another big thing I think is what I had and I lost it. Oh, like having the ability to kind of back up your your design decisions. I think that's huge. So when you're thinking about like designing something or bringing something to the table, taking that extra step and having a reasoning why you decided to design something. I feel like another thing that's important because especially in interviews, they'll challenge you about your certain process and why you made certain choices within your portfolio. I think just taking that extra step is huge. And I think a lot of employers like to see that, at least, that you're thinking.
Yeah, humility is also, like you were saying, if you want to spend time in the, I've been interacting with recruiters a lot lately, and a couple different times I've gotten them, they'll give me, before I have the interview with someone, they'll give me the feedback they've gotten from this hiring manager for other candidates. And a couple times I've seen people who say, well, she seems like, she might not be able to take direction well, or he seems a little bit, he wouldn't be happy being told what to do, or so. I don't know. I think that's one of those things that people like, would you want to be stuck in an airport for 4 hours with a know-it-all? I mean, I know you're in an interview where you're supposed to show how much you know and how much you've done. But then again, humility is, I don't know how you reconcile that in your own personal way, but it's a thing.
Yeah, I think being able to be humble about work and take criticism, and also respect, communicate respect in every aspect of your life, especially in the workplace. You respect. I believe something everyone deserves. Sometimes there's differences of opinion on that, and people may not give you respect. But if you're able to give respect at every single point in time, you yourself will be a candidate for that person in terms of trust. They know that they can come to you and you will actually listen. You're a great collaborator. Aside from that, I think also being a storyteller is a really important skill. Being a storyteller is not just communicating, but also being able to hear other people on the spot and find a way to keep that conversation going. That leads to another important skill, which is being able to build relationships, even relationships where no relationships exist. If you're able to cultivate a relationship with that person that's interviewing you for an hour, and show them that this is not about me, I really am more interested in hearing about you, and finding how to kind of like navigate that conversation, there's a greater chance you're going to get a call back, because at the end of the day, it's not like, oh, this person has great skills. It's, I actually like this guy, or this, this person. I want to keep in touch with them. I want to see how they're doing. And I think this is someone that when I come into the office on Monday morning, and I see them, is going to be, kind of like a warm feeling versus like, oh no, I got to brace myself for this experience. So I think being able to kind of like build relationships, know how to tell stories, be kind and respectful in every aspect of, your life and professionally, is definitely a good way to go. And those are great soft skills, life skills to have.
Yeah, that is huge. Just want to add to that, right? A lot of people make the mistake thinking just about the hard skills, right? Okay, I need to know wireframing, prototyping, deliverables, right? Without the soft skills, right? Without practicing and polishing them and really mastering that stuff, you really won't get anywhere, pretty much, right? There can be exceptions, but really soft skills, like if you just look at almost any job description, right? There's always like presentation, facilitation, meeting, interact, like team collaboration, like all of these activities are like facilitating meetings, very important, right? So it's just being like a personable, we call it personable person, someone who is personable and it's a pleasure to interact with. And that's the problem with like traditional learning. Like if you talk about like the typical colleges or even some courses, etc., they just mostly talk about these hard skills, where in reality, you look at any job description, it's mostly about experience and soft skills, right? Because lots of people can do the technical stuff. Few people are like, can do everything and are like nice to be around and can present and communicate well and can work with others well. It's like teamwork is just like huge. I think you guys, somebody started saying something.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that it's also important, as much as you want to polish your soft skills, it's important to be as much relaxed as possible and be yourself, because at the end of the day, you're going to spend a lot of time with these people and you want to make sure they know you, they like you the way you are, and you like them the way they are. So it's very mutual interview. It's not only about how great you are. sometimes you can join people and say, I just don't see myself talking to them 5 days a week. So yeah, calm down. It's a two-way interview.
Yeah. I want to also just add to that that being down to earth and just being yourself is the ultimate business card. It's one, it's good for your own health to be yourself. Always be yourself in any situation in life. But also, people want to see who you really are. They don't want to see just that 1 hour in the interview. They really want to see who you are as a person. And sometimes who you are as a person can translate into your work. There's ideas from your own life experiences, as diverse and as the myriad of life experiences that you have. You can contribute something from there. So opening yourself up and showing that the intimate part of yourself can definitely help in the work you do and the relationships you cultivate. And aside from that, one way to kind of like develop all these soft skills I think we're mentioning is, this is harder to do now that we're in COVID times, but actually taking a chance and doing things that you've never done before, going to a concert that you normally wouldn't go to, or in the past before COVID, going to a meetup you wouldn't go to, learning a language you normally wouldn't learn, or frequenting in a scene that you wouldn't go to normally, helps kind of diversify your soft skill set. Being able to communicate and navigate those different social circles and different areas of life just make you a lot more richer in terms of like what you can offer, and helps you develop the social cues you need to kind of communicate effectively. Today, I guess you could do that virtually, but there's always a way to kind of go about that.
If you're good at those already, then great.
Yeah, I want to quickly come back to an audience question that has a lot of upvotes. So David, your question. So now that we covered the hard and soft skills, right? So it seems that it's a little bit more obvious, right, that hard skills and soft skills are important, right? So what David is asking, what case studies, work experience do you think launched your career? Why? And if it wasn't specific experience, who do you know that got you an interview? So let's just start with the first part. What case studies and work experience do you think launched your career, and why?
Well, people are certainly looking for something similar in your background, right? So if you're applying for a company that is creating emails, it's an email marketing tool, they will be looking for, have you ever created something related to emails, right? If you're applying to a healthcare company, they're probably looking for something similar. So it will take less time to onboard you, but that's not the end of the world if you don't have that experience. In my specific story, once I got, I think most of the times it just was a good fit. I really liked the people, the conversation went well, and even though I didn't have all requirements in my list, it just worked out. So I've got a job once because I knew a person from a company. I see in your question it's a part. It was a specific person. Yeah, so I actually signed up for a 6 months JavaScript bootcamp to complement my skills and learn a little bit about coding. And there was a person next to me sitting 6 months that was really always behind with his assignments because of the life situation and family emergency. I was helping him out, and at the end of the bootcamp, he said that he's a creative director at a company that is looking for a UX intern. And I've been a really nice student and very determined, and I got an invitation for an interview. So you never know who's around you. Network all the time, be nice to people, help them out, and sometimes you can get an invitation for an interview. It doesn't mean you're going to land the job, right? The rest is up to you, but yeah, sometimes it works as well. But yeah, really a case in your portfolio that has something similar to what you're applying to, and just excitement to work.
I like the, I've always felt like the STAR method, the situation, I forgot what it stands for, but it's one of those things where you talk about the situation, you talk about your strategy, what you decided, how you decided to fix it, what actions you took, and then the results. But I always find that I've been advised by coaches to start my case studies with the results. So you talk about like a general, here's what this case study is going to be about. and then you say, here's the results. Here are the business results from this case study that our research was able to highlight, or whatever benefit your research had for the company itself, and then launch into the details of how you arrived there. I think people hate to hear this, but my coaches have also told me that if you find opportunities to speak, like at a meetup or something where people want to hear about research, that's huge. And that's another really useful skill that you're going to use as a researcher anyway, is being able to present, talk to your team, present in front of a group, present to really top level senior stakeholders. So any kind of presenting that you can do in talking about your research or talking about your designs and why you made certain decisions is going to serve you well in the future, no matter what you do.
And by the way, thank you, Carrie. David says that's a great story. So I think, so thank you guys for sharing your stories there. So anyone else wants to share their response to this question, like what case studies or experience kind of helped you the most?
Yeah, I think for me, there were two case studies that stand out to me that that I've worked on, two projects. One was at BeginX that I had done in the cohort I was with in Cary. What was great about that was that we actually ran the full gamut of, let's say, traditional UX design practices, right? So strategy, getting to understand, what business motives are there, what's out there, then going into research, analysis, then doing some design discovery, and then that iterative process, right, that we all learn about between analysis and design, and then, prototyping and testing, etc. It showed a whole, a wide breadth of UX thinking. And eventually, after BeginX, probably a month or two, a good friend of mine from advertising reached out to me and was working at a different company, and they needed a graphic designer for like a week. And so, I was all game for it. I was freelancing at the time. And then she followed up with another question. Do you know anything about UX and UI? And it's just so happens. I just finished doing this project for a client. And they're like, oh, great. So come through. We'll get you, we'll work out the billing situation. We'll get you seated, at this company for the week. And I'll introduce you to the creative director because he's really interested in your UX and UI background. Showing that case study from BeginX and the whole breadth of thinking beyond that, encapsulated, the one response that he gave me was like, this is great. This is probably a lot deeper than we're going to go, but this is actually kind of like what we need right now. And I really enjoy seeing like that whole process. So seeing how I went with my team from, talking to the client to finding data out there, really digging into the data and then turning it into a design and communicating that really helped. But the biggest thing that helped me there is just being able to communicate my work and aid in the storytelling with the portfolio piece. That led me to work on my second case study, which was for a sustainable wellness brand. I was really passionate about that. I really enjoyed the work and being able to apply what I had just learned. And that project followed the same scope of work where we ran everything from strategy to research to design. I was the only designer on that project. I remember Mike talking to me before my first day there and saying, this could be a really big opportunity since you're essentially like the lead designer here. You're going to be able to put to practice everything you've learned over the time here at BeginX. And so that ended up creating a case study that showed a lot of material that I was able to put into my portfolio. And then that opened other doors in that same company on a freelance contract, coming back and taking on another project. And interestingly enough, once you put your website out there and you make connections with that within the UX community, wherever you're at currently, opportunities start coming in because people start recognizing that, you have a skill set that, is sought after and that you could take their vision and put it out there in the market. So hopefully that answers that question regarding which case studies. And I think Eleazar asked for about what the first day of work was like. It was definitely, exciting, but at the same time, you're trying to figure out what are you going to do, how you're going to start about it. So taking a step back and planning always helps.
I will also say that the way I got into Chase was through volunteering. I volunteered a lot for the UXPA at different events. And at one of them, I met a guy who was a design lead at Chase, and he gave my name to the lead researcher who was, or actually the director of UX who was hiring. And so eventually it took like 9 months after that, but that's how my initial contact got made. And then I made a talk. I gave a talk, a 10-minute talk about the research I was doing as a salesperson at the medical device company at a UX research meetup here in New York, which was run by two guys who worked at Chase at the time, who later became my colleagues. So I don't know. I guess with all those different touch points, I was sort of destined to end up there at first. It was great.
Thanks, Gary. So I know we kind of started addressing this, but how many, like in your opinion, right? How many case studies do you think one usually needs to actually get a job?
3.
Let's do a quick poll.
My opinion.
3 to 5, not more than 5.
Yeah.
Even if you have 20 years of experience, put 5 the best projects you have.
Yeah, don't put anything that you're not. Yeah, exactly. Don't put anything up there that you're not proud of.
I've heard like if you open someone's portfolio and there are 30 projects, are you expected to look through all of them? No, you don't want to say you can put in your resume that I worked for these 20 amazing companies, but you put 5 from 3 to 5 the best projects ever, demonstrating different skills. You don't want to put also 3 exactly the same projects that you did exact same flow, it's the exact same design process for 3 different companies. So the idea is to demonstrate different scenarios, different skills you have in different environments.
Yeah, I definitely think that's key. Like, you know, Chris brought up storytelling. That's huge, especially within the portfolio. I would say 3 case studies, and I definitely agree with Sasha that showing how you are able to kind of think through different problems is huge. Whether it's a problem like, you know, a business problem, or you're dealing with like a B2B, B2C kind of situation, it's good to kind of show kind of how you would design given, you know, who you're designing for. I think that's huge. I was going to say something else about the portfolio or just about the case studies in general. I would definitely say that someone, I'm not sure if it was Carrie, someone said that they actually got an interview just with 1 case study. I feel like it was Carrie. I don't know. No, wasn't
Me?
you? Someone, but I do think if you're able to put in your portfolio 1 case study that really shows how you like an in-depth like process of how you went through something and have you solved a problem and showing each step and breaking it down and showing why you know decided to choose, you know, if you're doing research, why you decided to choose like individual research or individual interviews over kind of a survey, and really like give that that background. I think that's huge. I think 1 case study could be enough for some people if the case study is thorough, and I mean like thorough. But yeah, I think 3 max, because as you know, everyone's saying, you really, if you do 3, if you're missing something in 1, you can kind of make up for that. Like, let's say in your first project, you did a lot of like information architecture, and it was as much design heavy. Maybe your second case study is all UI. It's all like making like things look sexy, whatever, you know. So I think, you know, showing kind of, yeah, how you, you're able to design within different constraints is huge.
Yeah, I want to second that. Being able to narrate your story through your work, and also show yourself in your work through your portfolio is one of the biggest challenges you'll find. But it's the ultimate reward, because if all goes right, the reward is a job. And so what to answer the question, 3 is the magic number. It's the minimum. 3 to 5 is definitely that happy range you'd want to shoot for. However, the biggest challenge in there is being able to curate that work in your portfolio. Too short, and it may show that you didn't put enough care and attention into that storytelling aspect. Too long, you may run the risk of not being able to tell your story completely at the interview. Some interviews are structured where they want to get to know you first, and then they want to show you. They want you to walk through the portfolio and their thinking and what your role was. So you have to treat your portfolio, as Sarah Doody says, as a product. It is a product. It's your product, and ultimately, you want to understand who is at this company that you're going to be interviewing, or if there's a certain group of companies you're aiming for. What kind of work do they produce? How do you assume, right? Or what do you hypothesize is the way that they interpret work? And then start structuring your portfolio as that. And the way I go about it is I open up a notepad or something on Pages or even on a piece of paper. I just, almost like when you would write a book, you start writing your chapters, your outline, almost like when you have to do essays in college or in high school, and figure out, just put like what the main, what's the plot twist, right? What's this chapter going to be about in your portfolio? And then start writing in exactly, what you want to describe there. If you notice it looks too long in a Word doc, then you can imagine how long it'll be once you start adding images there. So that's a good gauge. But ultimately, you want to make sure you treat this as if you already had a persona, and you ask yourself, is there a product market fit between your portfolio and the person that's going to be interviewing you, or the company that's going to be looking at this? So 3, but make sure that 3 is gauged well.
Yeah, exactly. It's essentially, it's less about quantity and more about quality, right? It's sometimes the mistake people make is just doing a bunch of little mini projects, which can be useful just to polish your skills and practice, but they may not be that useful for your actual portfolio. So you want to have something sizable, large, big. Don't like it's not just to give a perspective there, right? It's not 3 case studies that you did in like one day each. Right, so that's not going to get you a job, right? It's something big and meaningful, right? It's more about showing at least one project should be like the end-to-end process, right? So you should show more phases. It shouldn't be just like, okay, here are my wireframes. It's not UX. It's more like UI, right? So it's, even though that is still important, you want to show the whole process how you got there, right? So it's like quality and comprehensiveness is really key here. So what I also want to kind of ask you guys is, I think we touched on this a little bit, but how can you actually, because when you look at job description, right, most companies, even entry level, they typically require like 1 to 2 or 3 years work experience. So can you give some advice? Like, how can you actually build that work experience when most employers are already looking for it, even for entry level? Any tips?
There are a lot of like design challenges out on the web. I would find them and do them myself. If I were working in design, if I were working in research, I would probably, that's a tough one. Let me think about that.
Yeah.
Did I understand the question correctly? The employees are looking for years of experience. How to feed this requirement if you don't have it? Is that right?
Essentially, it's one of the most critical requirements on any job posting. So how can you?
Fantastic tip, actually, while I was at the beginnings. I'm sorry. I think, Carrie, that was you who told me that. So apparently, there's such a term as a transferable skills. So all of us have years of experience or some years of experience in different careers. And even though my experience, guys, is the last thing I could have thought about it. I have a constitutional law education and economics. How is it related to UX? I don't know. But my previous job was a legal tech startup. And when I was sitting there at the interview and they asked me, do you have any experience? I said, oh, well, I studied constitutional law, so I know your users very well, even though it was in Russia, in different country, in my past life, but I know the problem from the inside, so I have years of experience. So you just take something that you have in the past, shape it, form it, and transfer it to your new yourself and trying to take advantage of that. That should work, because even though you start your career right now or a year ago, there are years of experience and knowledge you have from your previous jobs. Use it.
Definitely.
Thank you, Sasha. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would definitely. I mean, piggybacking. I think Oh, can you hear me?
Yep,
Yeah.
we can
Hello?
see you and
Yeah.
hear you. It's actually perfect now.
Okay, yeah, I feel like I have to ask every time I speak because I'm not sure. Just poor connection here right now. But yeah, I think a lot of the positions that I have, and I think both what Sasha said and Chris said earlier about just if you're reading through a description for a job and you see that the job is like, the company is focused heavy on like a particular topic that you're interested in. For my case, I look at companies that are like heavy on data because I have like a background in kind of Python and data analysis. So I try to kind of put my understanding of like product design and data analysis and kind of big data when I put that in perspective when I'm applying to jobs. And I feel like that kind of has helped me out when applying to positions, because we live in a world, of course, like data is like all around us. I kind of leverage that within all of my interviews that, because, if you're doing, especially Carrie can speak to this more in terms of research, you're dealing with data from like users. So I think my background in kind of design, in data really has helped me or influenced my design decisions and thinking about how to design for different users. But yeah, I definitely agree with what Sasha said.
Yeah, I wanted to add. I think I agree with what Jamal said. Kind of like tailoring your presence to what that role is asking for. For me, what comes to mind is there was a funny scene in Fresh Prince I remember seeing back in the '90s where Hillary was trying to apply for a job, and then Will was trying to help her with her resume. So she had no experience in this job whatsoever, but she was trying to like look for transferable skills. And Will would like overinflate these skills to the point where they seemed like executive level. So that's not the route to go, but the lesson to be learned there is look for parallels, right? To Sasha and Jamal's point, if you, for example, worked in a field that's related, even in terms of the roles, but the names are different, find ways to relate that even in your interview or in your resume. I know working in advertising with the amazing people I worked for at my when I was working in advertising at the agency I was working for, a lot of my project managers, which we used in the advertising world, had a lot of experience that was very related to product managers, which is what you will be working with as a UX designer or a researcher. And so being able to kind of like call upon those experiences and being able to communicate that in an interview or even on a resume and just speak about your experience in a way that fits the description of what they're looking for and also shows who you are as a professional is really, really key. And that ties into especially like your portfolio. Being able to tailor that to the people that are going to be reviewing it helps big time.
Thank you, Chris. All right, so besides what we already covered, right? I'm maybe like in addition to, right? So we already covered quite a bit of things, right? What do you think, like in your opinion, what do employers mainly look for in UX candidates? Your top 3 to 5 things that you would kind of summarize. What's most important, do you think, at least in your experience?
I was told this by the person who hired me at Chase. She told me that you can teach everything else, but you can't teach a passion and an enthusiasm for the process and the finished, the work. If you get really excited about fixing something and you show it and you're passionate about it and you talk about how you've noticed this and you've noticed that and along your way trying to transition and you get really excited about these kinds of things in your life, that's the kind of thing that they latch onto. And that's the kind of thing I've heard people say in interviews since then that attracts them to a candidate. especially a junior candidate. You can teach a lot, but you can't teach that. So don't be afraid to show that, I guess.
Thank you,
I
Karen.
think, yeah, their willingness to learn, I think, is important, especially as, and that's pretty much kind of what Carrie's saying. It's like someone who has that enthusiasm, like they know that they're coming into a position as a junior. They don't really know, where they fit within kind of the process, but that willingness to kind of learn, and they see that. I feel like that's huge for a lot of employers, and I think. Yeah, just getting back to kind of what, I think mentioned earlier about just being someone who is, having that, like, that skill to kind of be able to talk and communicate and be like personable and sociable. I think that's huge because, having technical skills, as Carrie said, is like, that's something that can be taught, but you really can't teach like someone who's going to come in, put their kind of feet to the ground, want to learn, do the research, study, read up on things. Like, you can't really teach that. You have to have it, and I feel like employers know if you come into an interview and you're just like, this is my portfolio, and the way you talk about it is not really enthusiastic. They can sense that. So that's, I think, another reason why you put projects on your portfolio that you're really excited about, you really love. So yeah, I feel like, take that passion and that desire to want to learn and be better and grow, take that into the interview and, ask, certain questions about like opportunities to grow. I think that's fair.
Also, start reading and listening to podcasts about UX and start talking about them and just say, look, I was listening to this podcast and I heard about this. And what do you think about this? Like, that's the kind of thing that if people who are consumed with something and they want something badly enough, they notice that. They can tell that about you if you're in an interview and you say, well, it's funny you asked me that. I was listening to this podcast and we were talking about this and I kind of think this. And if you can work that into conversations with people, even if you're volunteering somewhere and you meet someone at an event and they're like a senior person, those are good ways to break the ice.
Thank you, Carrie. So I just want to quickly I think Carrie maybe already answered this, right? I think Grace had a question about imposter syndrome, right? Have anyone ever experienced imposter syndrome transition into UX, and what have you done to get over it? So Grace, just from like our other events, by talking with like almost hundreds of people, it's almost everyone. And well, the funny thing is, once I attended a UX camp, right? And and Jared Spool was there, who's like a famous guy in UX, if you guys don't know, right? Yeah. So I actually approached him when we ran a workshop together. He was actually talking about that. So he said there are designers who experience imposter syndrome, and there are designers who should experience imposter syndrome.
And don't.
So that's just a funny answer to that. So definitely. And also, I noticed like a few people asked about case studies and experience, right? So another thing that I wanted to just briefly touch on, right, is a beautiful way to build work experience, right? It's just, first of all, keep in mind, having a full-time job is not the only way to build work experience, right? So that's like the first insight to understand to overcome this catch-22. You can volunteer. You can volunteer for not just nonprofits, but for any company that you can just persuade. You can do some work for them. And this is often much more effective to just volunteer for a little bit, get a great case study, get a lot of experience, and then get a great high-paying job. And it would still be faster versus just sending out a bunch of applications when you are not really there yet, right? And when everybody just gives you a rejection, I mean, you still get a lot of rejections, right? Don't get me wrong, right? It's just, you just have to get used to it. But your rejection rate will be, much better, much lower if you actually have that experience, right? And you can do it through volunteering. You can try to do freelancing, right? With freelancing, it can be a little bit more tricky, right? Because if you ask people to pay you, then they have much more leverage over you, right? Essentially, they dictate what exactly you're doing. Whereas if you're doing something pro bono, you have the leverage in shaping the project, and you can ensure that you're doing something are you doing something that is useful for you as well, where you're learning, where you're doing something comprehensive, right? So when you say much more, when you have much more leverage in that, right, it's basically can be much more useful for you. So there are like multiple ways. And if you guys want to add anything to that, because I know we'll have to wrap up relatively quickly. So, but I do want to go over a couple more questions and also take a few more questions from the audience.
Yeah. I would like to add to that. I think one way that helps get over imposter syndrome and has also helped me out in the past is, the interesting thing about when you're in the world of UX, you learn a lot of skills that you can actually apply to life. So treat yourself like a product and put yourself through the UX process and ask yourself, okay, what's the problem here? Okay, let's do some research. What is it that I'm insecure about, that I feel that other people know more than me? Or is it that I don't want to look bad? And then start investigating, right? And then start designing like that path out of that, right? A lot of time that comes with reflection, looking at where you have been in life, understanding we're all going through different life experiences outside of the workplace, within the workplace. And then developing that humility to understand that being an expert or telling people that you're an expert doesn't mean you're perfect. It means that you're well versed in what you know, but you're always willing to learn what others know as well. So being able to, take the, when in doubt, zoom out, take yourself out of that situation and understand what everyone else is doing. And where everyone else is coming from, and getting to actually know other people's stories, that problem may actually shrink. You may find yourself just drowning in a glass of water, as I've heard said before. A lot of time your insecurities seem a lot bigger. So put yourself through the UX process, do your own research about yourself and what's currently troubling you regarding imposter syndrome. Find out what other people's life stories are, where are they professionally, and that knowledge will actually help kind of temper or calm down those insecurities and actually make you more productive. And it could probably, even build relationships with your colleagues or other professionals that, you were unsure about because of imposter syndrome.
The other thing I always do is I always think, how would I have seen myself right now 3 years ago? Like, how would if I met me where I was 3 years ago when I was just starting, would I have been like, oh my God, I'll never be at that level. And now, and I don't feel any different now. I feel like, oh my God, I have so much to learn. So you're always, you just sort of put that in perspective, like, oh, well, I would have looked like I was so accomplished to my old self, but then I know that's not true. And yet I have come a long way since then. So you kind of, like you said, like, I like that, when in doubt, zoom out. I don't know, I never heard that before, but I'm like, that's a perfect way to describe that, zoom out and look at the big picture and be like, oh, I have come a little ways, I do have some stuff that I didn't have 2 years ago or 1 year ago. And even if you're just starting out, I do have experience in business, in marketing, and I do know what a business is after. They're here for, to make a profit, and this is what the kinds of things they look at, and that I can bring to the table. And if you have relationship building and you've got a particular superpower, that's not nothing. I mean, that's a really important thing. I was told when I got to Chase that skill or that quality in interviews where you can disarm someone who's a little bit resistant to talking about something personal. Like, I mean, my position was getting people to talk about their finances, their personal finances and investing habits and things, which nobody wants to talk about. So, after a year of that, I had my colleague just pop up and say, this is your thing that you're really good at. And no one had ever told me that before. So maybe ask people who you trust to tell you what they think you're good at, and then, I don't know, chip away at that self-doubt little by little, and be truthful and be gentle with yourself.
What do you guys think, if we kind of come back to portfolio for a second, right? What are in your opinion, the top 3 things for an effective portfolio that will get you hired?
You have to be able to track your results. Even if it's not a quantitative result, like 50% better at this, that's great. But then if it's a little like, we just made it easier for this to happen, just trackable results.
Mm-hmm. Do you have 2 more?
Yeah, I think. Sorry. Go ahead, Sasha.
Can I? Thank you.
Yeah.
Sasha.
I think this works better. Thank you, guys. I've noticed, I experienced a few times a situation that employers are looking for the background process in your portfolio. So yeah, you can have results, you can have beautiful UI, but as long as you're trying to apply for UX position, you have to have this like drafts and sketches and not pretty designs. They don't want to see only your last version. They want to see the progression of your project. So you want to show very low fidelity prototypes with ugly buttons that didn't work. Then second stage when you already improved that, and then the beautiful result. So the progression of your project is very important to. That's why every time when you have a project in work, make sure to take photos of your sketches, whiteboarding sessions, save it, and then apply to your portfolio. Never get rid of that. And someone asked right now what to do right now when we all work remotely. What should we use in this case right now? Yeah, photo screenshots of Miro. I have screenshots of Miro in my portfolio. It works well. Our sketches that you do on your desk, then take pictures of that and apply in early versions of your prototypes from Sketch that don't look pretty at all, and graphic designers will be like, what are you posting on your website? But yeah, do that.
Yeah, I also think being able to show where things didn't go as planned is really important in your portfolio. That's a real world thing that happens. Not everything goes perfectly. In March, not many people thought that this would happen. For example, COVID-19. And a lot of things get changed, and I can imagine in many different companies' design process. So if you're able to show where things, took a turn for the different, in your process, and be able to communicate that very well visually, the way you tell that story in your portfolio, and also show what you learned and if it got solved, how it got solved, adds a lot more depth to your portfolio and can show your employer that not only are you're really good at communicating and actually going through the whole UX process, but you're also great at understanding where the problems happen and then being constructive about that. And that to them shows them, well, if this happens at the office, then I can count on this person that they will try and identify and then work with their team to see how they can resolve this. So it's a really great thing to reflect in your portfolio, and don't be shy to talk about it when asked in an interview, or even just illustrate that in your case studies.
Are you guys able to see me and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Yeah, no, just as everyone had said, I think for me early on, I used to hear a lot of people say, it's all about your process and your portfolio. You really have to show your process. And I'm like, what does that mean? So I took that word and then I kind of equated it to, okay, they mean story. And I think Chris mentioned earlier as your portfolio is really that story from beginning to end. You're creating that introduction, you're creating some type of thesis, and then you're going into kind of the body. And then along the way, you have these different transitions that are happening throughout the process. And those should be highlighted. And I think for me, when I look at a portfolio that really shows, excluding, you have portfolios that is just really beautiful and sexy. That's all fine. But I think for me, I get really excited when I see someone show that full process and really okay, well, the way they even transition into different transition to the research and how they're able to pull in data and show okay, we found this information while we we did surveys for these people, or we interviewed these people, different call outs. I feel like creating that story and building it, it's almost like you're almost creating a film as well. You can think of it as a film in a way where you're like walking whoever is interviewing you through your process. And you're like, okay, this is beginning, this is middle, this is end. And I think that's super important. And when I see that, I'm like, okay, this person really is focused on the process. And I think process storytelling is huge, at least within kind of UX design and applying to jobs, especially as a junior.
Thank you, Jamal. So what I also wanted to kind of point out quickly, so guys, in the Q&A, right? So make sure that if you guys have questions, please put them in that Q&A section, and also upvote others' questions, right? And try to make sure that those questions are specifically about becoming that attractive candidate to employers, right? Because we want to make sure that it's applicable to as many people as possible, like we're attending this event specifically to learn about that topic. If you feel like you haven't learned something yet that you would like to learn, definitely ask it in your question, right? So we want to make sure that you guys leave with, because we don't have a lot of time left, we'll do a couple of, I'll ask one question and we'll do Q&A. And we want to make sure that you leave with much more knowledge than that you came with. So we're looking for more questions in Q&A and more upvotes to make sure that we're addressing the ones that are most popular. So probably the last question for you guys, right? What would be your kind of best, your top 3 tips for someone to become, really a top candidate, like somebody employers really want? Like anything else you haven't shared yet, like any insights and secrets,
You think we're holding out on you? Well, I've been saving this. Boy, I don't know. I guess. I mean, I've told you most of what I know, or what I'm just looking through my podcast list here to sort of put some names in the chat for people. But yeah.
I have something to answer in this question. I've been recently reading a book that is not related to UX, and it's something like, happiness books, so I'm not going to advertise it here. But there was a very interesting thought that there's not such a thing that you're going to become the best candidate that everyone wants. No, there are many people, they're all good. It's about the fit. So you're not trying to be the best candidate. You're trying to find the best place where you can be the best fit. So reassess your skills, reassess your personality, and find a place that will be really working for you. Even if you're the best UX researcher that with years of experience in finance, for example, and you're trying to apply to a position that is in a totally different world, but you're the best candidate, they will not want you. So it's a combination of your skills and the environment you're trying to apply yourself. Make sure it works, and then you're definitely going to succeed. And I have a little 101 for imposter syndrome. Can I share? I just really experienced it in a severe stage. So, number 1, accepting the problem. It's already a first step to solve it. So go on Wikipedia and read about this. You will recognize your symptoms. It's going to be already better. Number 2, imagine inside of yourself, what would be the worst case scenario? That the whole world will find out that you're not a UX designer. What's going to happen? Well, you'll lose your job and you'll look for another one. So it feels better. Okay, so you calm down. And number 3, now you're solving the problem. You're writing on a piece of paper, what are 3 things I need to be able to do to make sure I'm a great UX designer? So you write down specifics. Okay, I want to be fluent in Sketch, so I want to know how to build a design system. I want to be confident in public speaking, and I want to be something else. You put a deadline for yourself, you just work towards that, and you just reassess in a few months. And you're like, okay, now I really don't have a reason to be afraid of. But That's how I work through that. But definitely read the description of the syndrome. It really helps when you're like, okay, so it actually just something common that everyone is experiencing. That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sasha. Anyone else? Any of your last minute tips, advice, strategies, secrets?
Okay, I hope you guys can see me and hear me. I don't think, I mean, Michael had brought it up, and I think it's super important, especially as a junior, is at this point, and and Michael has said it, but now that we're all quarantining, reaching out to people, like doing informational interviews, I think is super important. I can give example now. I was I kind of was reaching out to a different companies. I started reaching out to like directors of different companies just to kind of get their like information about like what what or how they felt their company was kind of moving forward, just from like a business perspective. And I feel like for me that was kind of a way of like just understanding from like their perspective as a director of a company, like what are they like, what's their day to day, and whether you're looking like what are they looking for in kind of designers, whether you're a junior or a senior. And I think that was huge. And I just was reached out, again, he actually reached out to me the other day and said, he wants to kind of work on a kind of separate project with me or whatever. And I feel like that was like huge, because like I didn't know this guy at all. I just messaged him on LinkedIn saying, hey, I'm I want to gain more information about your company. I'm interested in pursuing a career in like XYZ. And he took well to me. We set up an interview, and I just asked him a boatload of questions, and that was received well. And he has I guess seeing me and how interested I am, like was able to kind of reach out to me again. I think that's huge. So I think if anything, I think it's important to really put yourself out there, and don't be afraid to join meetups, join different hackathons if you want to brush up on like different things. If you want to add to your portfolio, that's huge. There's so many different things you can do now to kind of put yourself in kind of a position to really show through like who you are as a designer. And I think that's important, because that's what companies want. They want someone who is different from the next, or from the last, or whatever.
Thank you, Jamal. All right, so I think we pretty much, unless we have any other last minute question, I think we answered that question. There was a question from a question about business, understanding business and marketing, right? So just to quickly touch on that, right? Generally, yes, it is a trend, and yes, it is getting more and more important for UX designers and product designers, which sometimes can be like almost the same role, to understand the business goals, basically, and the business itself, right? Because even though you're designing for the user, you are also, you have to take into account the business goals, because if business goals are not met, if the business is not there, you wouldn't have that job at all, right? So, of course, user is key priority, right? But business is important as well, right? Because ultimately, you're working for that business. Any other tips on that, guys?
Yeah, I think research the titles that people put on their job posts, because it is a very malleable field, right? Experience design. Product designer is different from a UX designer, but sometimes the person that's actually writing the post may be looking for something more unique. There may be a new term for that. So understanding the differences, and understanding that even in UX, there's a lot of overlaps. For example, a product designer would not just be focusing on the user, they would also have some insight and focus on the business strategy, and then looking for product market fits, right? How does your product not only answer user needs, but answers the business need as well? Whereas a UX designer may actually focus more on the user experience, right? And that could even go into not just user-centered design, but even like human-centered design, for example. understanding what these terms are, and then trying to research, seeing UX professionals on YouTube or reading the blogs that they put out there about different roles really helps you, equip you with that knowledge that will help you determine in the end, where does business play into this role, and where does the user play into this role, and if that's the fit for me. Do I feel more comfortable dealing with business and users versus just users? So knowledge is power in that sense, and it's a very useful thing to have. So research will always be your best friend in that realm.
Thank you, Chris. And yeah, so we do have to wrap up in a minute or so. So we will actually hang around just a little bit right after the event. So hope you guys enjoyed the event. And let me actually also quickly tell you about the program that we're running, since it may be a great opportunity for some of you guys in the audience, right? So basically what BeginX is specifically, right? It's a part-time UX career accelerator program with real social impact client projects designed specifically to help people transition into UX without quitting their jobs, right? So we've run 9 cohorts so far, helped over 90 people transition into UX. And again, alumni have been hired by, as you have seen, by many well-known companies like SiriusXM, Coach, ABC News, Facebook, JP Morgan, Google, and many more, right? So the advisors are also, and mentors are also UX practitioners from companies like Google, IDEO, Frog, The Economist, and many others. So who this program is best for specifically? The program is the best fit for people who know UX basics or come from a design, research, creative, tech, or related background and look to transition into UX in one of the most efficient and affordable ways and without quitting their current jobs. Right, so we're pretty selective and actually look for motivated and committed team players specifically. What you gain after completing the program, right, is you build not just the technical skills, but also the critical softer skills and real experience, expand your professional network, and go through the entire end-to-end hiring process and basically recruiting process training, right, and basically get ready to land a UX job. In fact, again, our grads have done so well that we now offer a money-back guarantee now. Basically, you either land a UX job or you get your tuition back plus an extra $200 if you're. So if it sounds like you may be a good candidate, you can learn more on beginx.com. The next start date is actually very soon. It's July 29th. It's next Wednesday, and our cohorts are quite small and fill up very quickly. So the next one is pretty much almost full. There may be like 1, 2, maybe 3 spots. We're finalizing all that stuff now. So if you feel you're a good fit, please act soon. Also, for anyone who attended this specific event, right, we'll be able to get a $400 tuition credit if accepted into the program. So to claim that credit, what you need to do is by this Friday, which is tomorrow, just go to the website, beginx.com, and schedule a free, no commitment career transition consultation, during which you'll get plenty of value regardless. So there's no commitment. You don't have to do the program. Or request program information on the site, or just apply. So with that said, we run actually many different types of events. So we'll keep you guys updated about upcoming events and share resources via our newsletter. It's usually sent every couple of weeks or so. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. And thank you, our wonderful speakers, for all the awesome insights that you guys shared. It was a huge pleasure to have you